In a move that sparked everything from memes to full-on costume debates, James Gunn and David Corenswet have officially explained why Superman, yes, the new Superman is rocking the classic red trunks again. But here's the twist. This isn't just about fashion. According to both the director and the star, the red briefs represent something much deeper about the tone of the new DC universe, the legacy of Superman, and how this version plans to connect with audiences in a completely different way. To understand why Superman's red trunks matter and why their return is making headlines in 2025, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. Before we get started, can we talk about how this channel has exactly 44 subscribers right now? That's not a fan base, that's a classroom. Hit that subscribe button and help us level up to a full-blown army of comic book nerds. When Action Comics #1 hit shelves in 1938, Superman didn't just become the first superhero in comics, he became the blueprint for every hero that would follow. And part of that blueprint? The red trunks. Inspired by circus strongmen of the early 20th century, the trunks weren't a random design choice. They were meant to show off power, masculinity, and athleticism. Back then, it wasn't weird, it was iconic. Bold colors, clear lines, muscle definition, the trunks defined the superhero silhouette. As comic art evolved and superhero media expanded into television, animation, and eventually blockbuster cinema, the trunks remained one of the most recognizable symbols in pop culture. Whether it was George Reeves in the 1950s, Christopher Reeve in the 1970s, or Brandon Routh in 2006's Superman Returns, they all wore the trunks. For decades, it was unthinkable to picture Superman without them. As superhero movies became darker, grittier, and more realism-driven, Warner Brothers made a sharp pivot. When Zack Snyder introduced Man of Steel in 2013, the trunks were gone. Instead, Henry Cavill wore a modernized, battle-ready suit, alien in origin, textured like armor, and completely trunkless. It was meant to show that this Superman wasn't your granddad's version. He was serious, powerful, a god walking among mortals. And for a time, that worked. Audiences embraced the change, especially in a post-Dark Knight era where heroes were supposed to be brooding and burdened. But not everyone was happy. As the DCEU evolved, so did the criticism. Many fans started to feel like Superman had lost something not just in costume, but in tone. He was distant, sad, less hopeful, less human. And for some, the missing trunks became the visual symbol of what was missing from the character heart. That's why this current debate hits harder than it seems. The return of the trunks isn't just a costume detail, it's a full circle moment. It taps into nearly a century of legacy. And more importantly, it signals that James Gunn isn't running from the past, he's embracing it. By bringing the trunks back, Gunn is saying, Superman doesn't need to be ashamed of where he came from. His idealism, his kindness, his earnestness, none of that is outdated. In fact, it might be exactly what audiences are craving now.
One of the biggest questions was, were we going to have trunks or we were going to not have trunks? I talked to Zack Snyder, who was like, I tried a billion different versions with the trunks and I couldn't get there. And I was feeling exactly the same way. I went in with David, he tried in not trunks and he tried in trunks, and I still was gonna go with not trunks.
Because in a world filled with anti-heroes, multiverse chaos, and morally gray protagonists, maybe what we need is the symbol that started it all in full. Trunks and all. James Gunn acknowledged the weight of the decision. He admitted he was hesitant about including the trunks at first, especially after seeing so many failed redesigns in the past. Snyder had tried multiple times to make the trunks work during his planning phase and ended up tossing them each time. The reasoning? They just didn't look right in a grounded, gritty world. Gunn felt that pressure too. He didn't want to lean into something that looked forced or silly, but he also knew that the trunks represented a different kind of tone, one that the Snyderverse never fully explored. So Gunn decided to think bigger. Instead of asking, do they look cool, he started asking, what do they say about Superman? Then came David Corenswet's input, and that changed everything. According to Gunn, Corenswet pushed hard to keep the trunks. He reportedly told Gunn that yes, they might look a little silly, and that's exactly the point. Corenswet believed the red briefs could help humanize Superman. Instead of portraying the character as a stoic, unreachable god, the trunks made him look a little more approachable, a little more relatable, a little more fun. And for Corenswet, fun matters. He wants this Superman to feel like someone kids can connect with, not someone who towers over them like a grim monument. The costume, in his view, had to reflect that softness, that hope. There's more to it than just looks. Psychologically, the red trunks serve as a visual shorthand. They balance out the blue and red suit in a way that's warm and familiar. They evoke nostalgia, childhood, and optimism, everything this rebooted Superman is meant to embody. Gunn explained that in the new DC universe, Superman isn't just a protector, he's an emotional center. He doesn't win just through strength, he wins through empathy. So the costume had to reflect that energy, It had to say, "You can trust me," at a glance.
He was down with his breath. He's sort of this terrifying creature, but he really likes kids and human beings and people, and he wants kids not to be afraid of him. And so that was the thing that made me decide to keep the trunk.
In that light, the trunks become more than just a costume choice. They're a symbol of how this Superman wants to be perceived: kind, confident, and emotionally open. When we talk about Superman's costume, we usually focus on how it connects to longtime fans, the people who grew up with Christopher Reeve, who debated the Snyder Cut, or who follow every casting leak and costume tweak. But James Gunn made one thing crystal clear: this new Superman isn't just for them, he's also for the kids, and that matters a lot. In Gunn's own words, Superman should be someone a child can instantly recognize as a friend, not a soldier, not a weapon, not a distant alien, a hero. The kind you draw on your notebook at school. The kind you want on your birthday cake. The kind who makes you believe being kind is cool. And that's where the red trunks come in. As silly as they might seem to adults raised on realism and edge to kids, those trunks are a visual cue. They say, "I'm safe, I'm good, I'm fun." There's something bright, cartoonish, and familiar about them, and that's intentional. Gunn isn't designing a costume to intimidate. He's designing one to inspire. Think about what kids see today. Superhero suits have become darker, busier, more armored, more tactical. But for a 6-year-old in the front row of a movie theater, that can make heroes feel distant, unreachable. And if you want to reintroduce Superman to a new generation, the last thing you want is a costume that feels cold and uninviting. Gunn wants to flip that. He wants kids to look at Superman and see hope, not a super soldier. He wants them to see someone who might stop and help them if they drop their ice cream, not just punch through a villain's spaceship. David Cornswit's Superman isn't just another powerful figure flying across the sky. He's someone little kids should want to be. That means looking a bit softer, a bit more classic, a bit more human. The trunks help do that without needing a single line of dialogue. And for parents, especially those who grew up with the Reeve-era Superman, it's nostalgic. It bridges the gap between generations. Kids get a colorful, trustworthy hero. Adults get a Superman that feels like the one they remember. That's not just smart design, that's emotional engineering. Let's be honest. DC's cinematic track record has been all over the place. The Snyderverse built a cult following, but it also created a divisive tone that alienated a big part of the audience. Then came the patchwork years. Shazam, Birds of Prey, The Suicide Squad, The Flash, all technically in the same universe, but narratively disconnected and tonally inconsistent. It wasn't a shared universe, it was a chaotic multiverse stitched together by cameos and confusion. Gunn stepping in with Superman marks the beginning of something cleaner, more focused, and emotionally grounded. And by choosing to put the red trunks back on Superman, he's making a statement that goes way beyond nostalgia. We're not running from the source material anymore. We're embracing it and rebuilding from it. As superhero movies became darker, grittier, and more realism-driven, Warner Brothers made a sharp pivot. When Zack Snyder introduced Man of Steel in 2013, the trunks were gone. Instead, Henry Cavill wore a modernized, battle-ready suit alien in origin, textured like armor, and completely trunkless. It was meant to show that this Superman wasn't your granddad's version. He was serious, powerful, a god walking among mortals. And for a time, that worked. Audiences embraced the change, but not everyone was happy. So what does this all mean? At a glance, the red trunks might seem like a simple aesthetic choice, but they actually say a lot about what kind of Superman we're getting. Not just a return to classic visuals, but a return to classic values: compassion, humility, warmth, and belief in humanity. James Gunn and David Cornswit aren't just reviving the red briefs. They're using them to say, this Superman is different. He's not ashamed of his past. He's not afraid to be hopeful. And he's not here to dominate the world, he's here to inspire it.